Hello. Oh, this is so exciting. Hi, I'm Howie, and I guess I had an opportunity to introduce myself earlier today, so I'll skip that. And I noticed everybody was doing these fun polls instead. So I'm going to ask, is there anybody out here other than myself who's already wearing the Ember socks that we got in the swag bag? Yes, they're so fun, right? I got them. There they are. We're having a good day. So I work at Red Shelf, and we're an ed tech company. And being at Red Shelf and in the education space is really what introduced me to the world of accessibility in web development. And I was talking to Melanie Sumner recently, and I mentioned how I sometimes have this feeling like my career sort of just happened to me. I didn't really set out to be a front-end developer or care about accessibility or usability. And yet here I am. And she helped me reframe that sentiment into something much more positive that I really appreciate, so I want to share it here. And that was that I've managed to find a career that liked me back. And I think that's so refreshing, right? So Melanie, thank you for that, because it's just like the best phrase ever. And so I hope with this talk about accessibility, I can show you how accessibility can like you back as well. And maybe even like. I don't know. We'll see. So the presentation is called No Bad Legos. And I just want to share my perspective about how we can use Ember development and how we build components and integrate accessibility into that process in a meaningful way. So step one, make your Legos, right? I got Emmett up here on the screen next to a little pile of Legos. And without any Legos, Emmett, our favorite master builder, has nothing to build with. And so we need to make him some Legos. We got to give him the parts to use to build some stuff. And Tom's quick demo in the opening keynote about his little weather widget component really resonated with me, because it really is this nice, simple, powerful process where we can just quickly throw in some HTML and move to this fully functioning component that can do this really great stuff. And it allows us to create these little building blocks, these little Legos that we can isolate and minimize complexity in our applications. And so I want to start with a quick review of what I call component-driven development, because I think it's really important to just level set on what I mean by that. So here's an example of a page that might look like a search results page if we were on an online bookstore and looking for anything by Jane Austen. So we have a heading and a list of what looks like a card that represents a book with a book title and a description and a cover image. And a template for this is probably pretty familiar for a lot of us, might look like this, where we're iterating over a list of book objects from our controller. And for each of those, we're rendering out some basic HTML for an image tag for that cover image, and some divs for the information about that book. In component development, we can pull that out. We can say, we know that a book is just this single thing. It doesn't care about the search page, and the search page doesn't really care about the book. The book cares about the book. And so we can make these nice little isolated components. And when we get back to the search results page, we can replace that HTML with our single component, using some nice Octane syntax now. And it just really helps us drive this separation of concerns. And that offers us so much flexibility. Now that this component exists in the code base, any new pages that need book summaries can take advantage of it. So we might have it on the search results page, or on the cart page, or in the checkout. And that also allows our users to have some familiarity and affordance as they go throughout our applications. And as we make updates to those components, those apply everywhere. And more exciting than that, we can test them, right? So when we generate a component using Ember CLI, we automatically get a test created, and we can go in and render an instance of that component with some mock data and make some assertions that it's behaving as we expect. So we built some Legos, and they're tested, and they're reusable, and I think Ember is just such a powerful framework that allows us to do this so quickly and easily. And I just want to emphasize how awesome that part is, and it is fun, like Tom was saying. Like, it's fun, it's just easy, and you can throw it together so quickly. And it really just makes me think I'm building this little collection of Legos, and I love that because I love Legos. I remember when I was a kid, one year for Christmas, I opened the one gift under the tree that had my name on it, and I opened it to discover that I had inherited my dad's substantial set of Legos. And needless to say, I was thoroughly disappointed to discover I was receiving a used gift on a day when I expected nothing but shiny new toys. But a day went by, and I got over it pretty quickly because Legos are awesome. Like, they're incredible. They've been around for 100 years, and they're all the same, and they work together, and they still work today. They don't get old, and they're familiar, and they just work. I didn't mean to change the slide. Here we are. So we've got our Legos, and we build them. We have our little Lego set, and so now maybe we can build a house with those Legos. We might have a window component and a little gate component and a door component. But wait, what about accessibility? You might be wondering, Howie, why are you going on and on about components? I thought this was about accessibility. You said you talked to Melanie, and she's like the human form of accessibility in Ember. Like, I expected more accessibility by now. So yeah, fair question. What about accessibility? Where does it happen, and who's responsible? Well, a lot of us are in organizations with teams and roles, and what are we supposed to do? How can we get accessibility to be a part of that? We might have our CEO is visited by some angel in the middle of the night who shares an idea for a great new product, so he runs over to the product owner and works with the designers to figure out how it's going to look and work, and the engineers go and build it as quickly as they can and hand it off to QA, and they deploy it out, and then customer experience makes sure that the users are satisfied with that product. So how do we figure out accessibility in something like that with so many moving parts and so many cooks in the kitchen? And really, who is responsible for accessibility? And I think many of us who have been in the realm of accessibility for a while would agree that it's all of us. We're all responsible for making sure that the products that we're building are accessible. Your title doesn't matter, your role doesn't matter. You're on a team in an organization that is building products for people. And it's everybody's responsibility to hold each other accountable to ensure that we're building products that are accessible. So forget the roles and the titles, because everything is awesome, because you're part of a team, right? And that's so exciting. You've got all these different perspectives and these different people and experiences, and that's really just going to drive better product development. So with this in mind, I want to share a common phrase in the world of accessibility, which is that accessibility is not just a checklist. I've definitely said this. I've heard others say this. I believe in this statement, and I've never had anybody else try to refute this statement. But it's a little daunting, right? The nebulous world of accessibility, and what does this mean? How do I, as an engineer, contribute to that? What can I actually do to get started? What can I control to make sure that I'm contributing to this effort? Well, let's look at that phrase. Accessibility is not just a checklist. I think it's very carefully worded, and intentionally so, because accessibility is not just a checklist, but there is still a checklist. So I got a nice little schematic of a Lego man and the exact dimensions of how Lego characters are constructed. And we have these same kind of rules for accessibility in the web. And Melanie alluded to this yesterday. And this is great, and dare I say awesome, for so many reasons. It gives us a direction and a foundation on which we can build our products and make great accessible features for everyone. And completing this checklist is by no means an indicator that our product is accessible, but it definitely means that we're off to a great start and ready to start building something great. So what is the checklist? There are more than one. There's a few. For For the purpose of this presentation, I'm just going to focus on WCAG. So if you're new to accessibility, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, are a great place to start. These are standards that are defined and iterated on by accessibility working groups like WebAIM, and it's a working and living document. It's organic and it grows and changes as technologies and standards emerge and evolve. And the very first line of the abstract for WCAG states that Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG 2.1, covers a wide range of recommendations for making the web content accessible. Yeah, there are resources out there that tell us how to approach accessibility in our web development. Color contrast, form labels, alt text, how to associate elements with ARIA attributes. It's all out there. But that's a lot. It sounds like a lot, and you might be asking, so what does this mean for master builders like Emmett or developers like myself? And can't we just go back to those first slides where we were just building the fun components? Because I understood that part. But maybe we can just take a breath and look at this, and maybe we can contribute to making sure that that checklist is checked off. It's a small thing, and we know that accessibility is not just that checklist, but we know that checklist is there. And so maybe that's a good place to start. And I think that's a really good entry point. I'm a developer, and I love checklists. I love rules and conventions and specifications because I'm lazy. It means that I don't have to make a decision. It means somebody else has already figured this out and has offered this pattern that I can just jump onto and implement. And so we've got this checklist, excuse me, so we might as well use it. So let's revisit step one. Maybe step one wasn't written correctly. Maybe make your Legos should be make your accessible Legos. Maybe we need a better definition of done. We tried to skip to step two without ever checking that the little pieces that we're making are accessible themselves. So we're setting ourselves up for failure. And that's sort of okay, I guess, if we didn't know any better. Our good friend Emmett did not know any better. And that's fine, but then he saw Melanie's talk yesterday, and now he has no excuse. And he's pretty sure he remembers a thing about alt text. So he's going to revisit the test that he wrote for the book summary. So I've added a line in here to this book summary that says assert.ok, find the image of my component, and assert that there's an alt attribute that's populated. And this is probably something I've done in real life before, and something I wouldn't be surprised to see a new developer try out as they're understanding and learning about accessibility. But it's unlikely that many of us would be interested in learning every single WCAG rule and trying to test against every single WCAG rule while we're building our components. Right? Like, that sounds hard. We're not allowed to say that, though, right, Melanie? I'm just borrowing her entire presentation, if you haven't noticed. And I think it's a really common reaction to this kind of problem, though. We get overwhelmed by how much there is, and we're not sure how to tackle it. But maybe we can rephrase that. Maybe tedious is a more appropriate term if we're thinking about what it would take to learn every WCAG rule and test for every WCAG rule on every element in every component in every state. And I'd probably agree with that statement. That does sound tedious. And maybe this attitude could start to come off as sounding lazy, and I certainly use that word to describe myself, but I'm not about to use that word to describe a room full of very talented Ember developers, because I would like to come back here in the future. Instead, I'll say this. This is a room full of people who are passionate about finding creative ways to solve problems and address inefficiencies. I mean, just look at the number of you who probably use Vim because you want to reduce how many keystrokes you're using every day. Yeah, like, and outside of these walls, there's tons of other talented developers that are building awesome tools, and they're sharing this with all of us and these communities. I was fortunate enough to attend the same CSUN assistive technology that the conference that Melanie mentioned yesterday. Again, I'm just doing everything Melanie did. And like she said, it was a truly humbling experience to see so many passionate people engaging in this community to drive assistive technologies forward and just endlessly innovating and pushing the boundaries of what we can do with technology. And so let's take a look at one of those organizations that's doing some of this innovation. DQ is a consulting and educational resource for accessibility and also maintains a number of open source accessibility tools. One of those tools is the Axe engine, and if you're not familiar, it's an open source node project that parses HTML and checks that HTML against a number of accessibility rules, including WCAG. And there's many integrations for this Axe library. There's Selenium integrations, there's browser extensions, and it's a really active open source project, and they're bringing some Android features and iOS features later this year, and Microsoft has just gotten on board with some really big commitments there as well. And so it's just really exciting to see something like this being adopted by the industry. And so let's take a look and see what it does. I'm about to air out some dirty laundry for y'all. This is a screenshot of Red Shelf's login page. No shame. And next to it is the dev tools with the Axe checker extension. And you can see we have some violations. So let's look at exactly what those violations are. It says issue description ensures every form element has a label, and then tells me the impact is critical with a link to learn more on DQ's website. And then it tells me the element location and the element source, so I can see that it's the input element with an ID of username. And it even gives me a quick remediation suggestion that I ought to not have the label hidden, and that sure makes sense. So this is a really easy tool to use. Any of us can start using this. Anybody in your team can probably start using this. It's just a browser extension. It's available in Firefox and Chrome. And you can visit any page and run this and just instantly get some feedback that you can take action on. And so we're a little closer to automating this. Again, lazy. I don't want to open every web page as I'm developing and run this tool and look through what the errors are, and I don't want to put that on our QA or customer experience team. And so there's got to be something we can do. But fortunately, again, we are passionate people looking for clever and creative ways to solve problems. And so I'll ask, are you there, Axe? It's me, Ember. And I just want to note that I spent over 3 years and a lot of money taking improv and sketch writing classes at Second City in Chicago. And this is the first joke that I attempted to put in this presentation. And it's a Judy Blume reference, not a Lego reference. And I'm OK with that because it makes me smile. So this is basically a $10,000 joke just for me. So thank you for indulging. Thank you. But let's take a look at where we are now. When we're building components, we have these tests that we can write where we're rendering a single instance of a component, and we're getting that HTML in the test container and making assertions against that HTML. And this Axe tool, this Axe engine, takes in some HTML and makes some assertions against accessibility guidelines. And those sound like some pretty similar patterns. And so I wonder if there's anything that has combined them yet. Well, we're Ember. We're creative and ambitious. And so there is absolutely the Ember A11Y testing suite. It's super easy to use, I hope, for all of you as well. And it's really just a wrapper around the Axe engine that you can use like any other test helper in your tests. So let's take a look at that. I have our original test here for our book summary, and we want to add this Axe integration to test just this component. What do I have to do? Not a whole lot. Just by importing that library and then calling this A11Y audit function and passing in the element that I want to test, I can run that Axe engine on the component I'm developing. So just like that, we've automated away the process of waiting for a human to go in and test this. We've automated away the process of us as developers going into Chrome DevTools and using the Axe extension. We're bringing this directly into our code base, directly into the process of writing code, and bringing that into our continuous integration processes. So this can block builds. And that's pretty powerful. And just to really emphasize it, that's all that's happening. We're just calling one function on one element. And I like this little diagram I've created because I imagine the A11Y audit function just going in and giving your component a hug and just making sure it's OK. And if it's not, then you can help it out. And so we get some really great feedback from using the Ember A11Y testing suite. We can run these tests in the terminal, and we'll get output just like we saw from the Chrome extension. So we get some clear messaging about the number of violations and what violations they are. So we can see images must have alternate text. If you were looking closely at the component, you will have seen that I ignored alt text in that component, and sure enough, this test caught that. You can also run them in the browser, and your Chrome DevTools will spit that out in the console, telling you the number of violations, the offending markup, and links to DQ to help you remediate that particular issue. And so you really get this super fast feedback that kind of turns into self-service. So it becomes really part of almost the onboarding process where you can just share your testing process, but not necessarily go super deep into every single rule of WCAG with new members of your team. So you get this nice passive process of learning about accessibility that you don't have to go and check if they're failing, because they'll just be told if they're failing and they can fix them themselves. So to recap those benefits, you get that continuous and passive learning. You prevent introducing accessibility regressions because you've got those tests in there. So if somebody else goes in and changes your component, that test might fail if you introduced a new accessibility violation. And we're really leveraging existing best practices here. All of those 3 lines was all that had to be added to introduce accessibility testing for that component. And then we have this opportunity to build these reusable and robust tested components and add-ons and libraries and internal tools. And so here I've got a screenshot of Red Shelf, where we have an internal UI library with a handful of components similar to Bootstrap or Ember Paper, if you're familiar. And so here's an example of a card component. And we know that anybody using our card components, if they're using the blue one, we know that the color contrast is sufficient. We know that that passes Ember accessibility testing. And so this just lets us create our little Lego sets that we can share across teams and across products. And again, just makes me love the idea of Legos. And because those Legos I got for Christmas, I spent the next year telling everybody how excited I was. All my family and extended family, I didn't have any friends, so it was just family, telling them how great they are. And then I found out I had an enemy in my family. My next birthday came along, and my uncle brought this beautifully wrapped gift. And I started opening it, and I saw some familiar shapes and colors, and I got really excited, thinking my Lego collection was about to grow. But as I finished opening it, I realized it was like some other building block set that were definitely not Legos. And so I was very disappointed because I did not work with my Legos. They were useless, and quite frankly, so is my uncle. And this is being live streamed, so that's nice. So here's my plea. Don't build bad Legos. If you're building add-ons and shared tools and internally, publicly, don't build bad Legos. Emmett doesn't want them. He now knows about Ember accessibility testing, and he's checking if your add-ons are using them. We have control over our end of the code base, so over our add-ons and our applications. So let's make sure we're taking the time to put some good, real Legos in there that people actually want to play with. Make accessibility part of your definition of done. and see where that takes you. So we do have some limitations. You can see the Lego family is a little shocked to find some limitations here. Maybe everything's not awesome, but if you've seen Lego Movie 2, the second part, you'll know that's okay. They're so good. The Lego movies are incredible. I am tempted to just close out this presentation by playing the Not Awesome reprise of the Awesome song, because I think it sums it up better than I will, but I will resist because of copyright laws, probably. But you should listen to it later, and I hope you fall asleep humming it to yourself tonight. I digress, though. We have limitations, and we have solutions for some of those limitations. And we don't have solutions for others. But maybe we can find a path forward where we will. Limitation number 1, this is not a replacement for the whole process. Again, accessibility is not just a checklist, and I can't stress that enough. But now that we've completed some of the checklist, we're ready to go and have those more exciting conversations with our product teams and our designers, and really start from a place where we've got good building blocks. And for that, we still need to rely on others, and I think that's a good thing. Again, we're bringing our own perspectives and our own experiences into this, and the more perspectives and experiences you can bring in, the better your products are going to turn out. So it's a team effort. Just make sure you don't invite my uncle, because he'll ruin it by bringing some third-party library for a JavaScript carousel for an image gallery on the homepage of your website, and it's going to be terrible. Limitation number 3, it's mostly static. So the Axe tool is only making assertions on what's currently rendered in the DOM. So if you're using interactions and you're changing the state of your component, you're going to need multiple instances to that Ember A11Y call. And so limitations. Complex interactions are also tough to test, things like keyboard navigation or focus management. Those can be tough or impossible to test, and you might need to look into other strategies for that. And finally, it only tells you when you've misused something. It won't tell you if you need to do something more. If you've got a button, for example, that expands something else somewhere else on your page, it's not going to tell you, hey, you should use an ARIA attribute to associate those. But if you try to use those and you use it incorrectly, it will tell you. So baby steps. Limitation number 4, not so much of a limitation as much as something I would just like to call out. I've been talking about components this whole time. All of this is possible in our application tests as well. It would be totally possible to build a whole house out of Legos and forget to put windows and doors on it, and then Emmett would just be stuck in there on his double-decker couch all alone. And so that's where our application tests can kind of catch that integration of our components together. Then number 5, am I counting correctly? No seal of approval. So other than looking at the code base right now, you wouldn't be able to see that individual components are being tested with this tool. So here's just the nice casual proposal of perhaps we put some sort of badge on the components in our documentation that are automatically generated if it detects that it's been tested for accessibility. And our final limitation is the fact that I have to write that line of code at all. Again, I am lazy. That one line of code can just be too much some days. I have absolutely opened a pull request where I forgot to test using Ember A11Y testing, and somebody on my team is like, hey, you forgot this test. I thought you cared about accessibility. I'm telling Melanie. So it's a limitation, but maybe we can do something about it, right? Look at what Octane has brought us. We don't need to use this.set and this.get anymore. So maybe we can apply that same vigor to these kind of tools and really bring this into just every part of the process. And maybe we could add a configuration option where this runs anytime a component test ends, or maybe we integrate with Ember semantic test helpers, and anytime a test helper action runs, after that, we execute this on the component. And so with that, I'll just say, let's fix the web. I'll respond to Melanie by saying, yes, the web is broken. Let's fix the web. So thank you, Melanie, for giving me a much better closing slide than I would have had otherwise. We've got tools available right now to start this process in our projects, and I think they're really great. And they're getting us in a really good starting position. And I think we have a really good path forward to build these tools out and add a lot of features. And so I think we can really evangelize this, and we can go ahead and fix the web. So thank you.